Welcome to this video from the CfEMLive team at Grimsby Institute. We asked the question, can mastery bloom in further education? And we set out to explore the roots of mastery and how it could be applied to GCSE Resit Maths. Data from 2019 from the JCQ shows that only 1 in 5 students who were entered for GCSE Maths Resit achieved a grade 4 or above. Shows why the Centres for Excellence in Maths project is so important. To help focus our inquiry, we used 2 sub-questions. First of all, what actually is a mastery approach in the first place? And how could a mastery approach fit with the GCSE Resit curriculum? So our first step was setting out to discover what a mastery approach actually means. And we ended up starting back in 1920s Chicago. The Winnetka Plan, formulated by American educator Carlton Washburn in Chicago, looked at ways of developing a curriculum for the whole child and individualized instruction to fill gaps in that child's knowledge. Carlton Washburn's work heavily influenced the work of Henry Morrison, who was also an educationalist in the 1920s Chicago. Morrison devised a mastery formula of testing, teaching, testing again, adapting your procedure to fill the gaps in the knowledge, teaching, and then testing again, and repeating that cycle until a student has reached mastery of a topic. In the early 1960s, John Carroll wrote a model for school learning in which he examined the work of Washburn and Morrison from Chicago. He stated that aptitude isn't the level at which a student learns, but the time it takes them to learn a topic. We found that the 1968 paper, Learning for Mastery, written and published by Benjamin Bloom, really codified what a mastery approach to teaching and learning should and could be. Bloom re-emphasised that time was so important for mastery and said that most students, perhaps over 90%, can master what we have to teach them given enough time. Bloom's paper reached really wide audiences, and as a result there was a flurry of research looking into whether a mastery approach to teaching and learning could be successful. In 1971 and 1974, James Block brought together some volumes of papers of research on mastery learning, theory and practice. We really like the idea that motivation of students and mastery are so closely entwined, and this was brought up in 1971. In the late 1970s, research turns toward teacher training and how teachers could best implement a mastery approach. And then in the 1980s, it was highlighted that subject-specific knowledge and pedagogy was vital for a mastery approach, and that teachers needed a toolkit of multiple representations to be able to apply it. Over the past 10 or so years, there's been a renaissance in teaching and learning for mastery. PISA and TALIS results from 2012 and 2013 showed a gap between learning in England for mathematics and learning in East Asia. Here's some data that shows the difference between England and Singapore. What's interesting to note is that the average mean maths score was 494. So England wasn't below average, it just wasn't as high as those countries in East Asia. As a direct result of this data, together with the new national curriculum, the National Centre for Excellence in Teaching Mathematics and the Maths Hubs were formulated, and their main purpose was to look at mastery teaching. By examining teaching and learning in East Asia, the National Centre put together these 5 big ideas for teaching for mastery. It's interesting to note here that in Shanghai and Singapore and East Asia, they don't call this teaching for mastery, this is just teaching. Our research showed that there were so many different definitions of what mastery could be. So we needed to really think about what mastery could mean in FE, and in particular for FE Maths resits. It was our opinion that the Teaching for Mastery 5 Big Ideas were great for teaching from first principles. But resit students have met all of this knowledge before, perhaps not successfully, but they have met it before. So it should be about intervention and filling gaps. Which takes us right back to the 1920s in Chicago. At Grimsby, we've been developing the Focus 15 scheme of work. It's very much a work in progress, but what we've done is we've stripped back the whole GCSE curriculum to 15 key topics. By having 15 key topics, we know that we can make it fit within a mastery approach, our mastery approach, where we're looking at time and intervention. So the resit course should help students build on their prior learning, not teach from first principles. They should be looking for those gaps and filling them individually. And the 15 topics have been chosen, so if students are able to fill those gaps, they'll be able to pass their GCSE very comfortably and also have a usable set of skills for the future. We also looked into how Morrison's formula for mastery could be used in the resit classroom. Starting with assessment of prior knowledge, then teaching or instruction to fill the gap, then assessment of the grasp of knowledge of that skill. And if the student hasn't grasped that knowledge, teach it in a different way, look for those multiple representations. This links to the National Centre's 5 Big Ideas. And then once the student has got grasp of that topic, then we can move on. We've been discussing ways that this mastery loop can work, especially in light of the current situation in the world. And we think that this will fit perfectly with remote learning too. So perhaps this may be our research focus for next year. Methodology-wise, one thing that we will be taking forward most definitely is the work that we've done on our lesson snapshot. To make sure that any observations that happen when we're gathering data are consistent, the lesson snapshot instrument is used by anybody within the research group who's doing an observation. Data can be collected digitally on an iPad or a Surface, or on a clipboard with a pen and pencil. And then, once they're all filled in, we can start looking for themes and commonalities and areas for further research. Despite the research cycle being cut short, we do have some conclusions and some recommendations that we'd like to share. On looking at the literature and looking at the origins of mastery, we thought that it was the time and intervention aspects of mastery that were more important to FE than the concrete, pictorial and abstract. By having a policy of time and intervention and gap filling, that is how mastery can be achieved. And concrete, pictorial and abstract are a tool to achieve that mastery. We want to move forward with Morrison's formula from 1926 about testing the students, teaching, testing again, and repeating this process until a student has filled their gap. So, our recommendations. In FE for resit maths, having individualised learning to fill a learner's gaps really encapsulates mastery and what it's all about. Those gaps can only be filled by careful monitoring, assessment and feedback by both staff and learners. And to make sure that teachers have the toolkit to be able to assist their learners as they're going through that loop, we need to make sure that we have CPD covering multiple representations. So the question we asked was, can mastery bloom in further education? Our answer is yes, it can. But please look back at the origins of mastery, the roots of mastery, to discover what it's really all about.